how do we work with transitions? How can we know what genre our cue is in? How can we find libraries and a list of libraries to publish to? And once they're in, how do we keep track of all of those placements? Also, how do we find references, and what's the deal with upfront fees? Well, I'm going to be answering those questions on another Q&A episode today, as well as listening to an uplifting, positive piano-driven cue from a brand new member of the 52 family on this week's episode of the 52 Cues podcast. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the 52 Cues podcast. What is 52 Cues? Well, we are a diverse, interactive community of composers and producers devoted to writing better production music through lifelong learning, mutual support, and encouragement to others along their journey, starting and focusing on writing just one cue per week. I'm so glad you have joined me, and I'm glad you found me however you found me. Before we get started, I do want to give a special word of thanks to my Patreon patrons whose support helps keep this channel cooking along and has now for over a year. Thank you so much to my faithful supporters. There's going to be a lot more about the Patreon at the end of the video. We're also going to be checking out a cue today from composer Andrew Thomas. It's called Clouds or Mountains, and it's an uplifting piano-driven cue. He is a relatively new member to the 52 Cues family, and happy to have him on board. And today we're going to be looking at answering questions that were posed over at the 52 Cues community. If you want to skip over the Q&A and get right to the cue breakdown, check out the timestamps in the description below. And lastly, remember, we are both on YouTube and in the podcast app of your choice. If you're watching this on YouTube and want to take us on the go, then search for 52 Cues in your podcast app. And if you are listening to this via a podcast and want to catch us on YouTube, just click the YouTube link in the description to the episode. So, like I said, every now and then, I really like answering multiple questions at a time. Sometimes questions posed become full episodes, but I like taking time and just kind of answering questions buckshot style, I guess, for lack of a better word. So let's go ahead and dive in. This first question comes from Scott McLaughlin. He asked, transitional elements are still a little fuzzy to me. I do put them at the end of phrases, at edit points, entering into the next section after edit points, and at the end and beginning of every section. What puzzles me is how can an editor make a loop if there is a transitional element such as a riser at the end of every loop? Maybe this is where the stems come in. Currently, when I have a track accepted, I supply approximately 18 stems. I realize that transitional elements are great for stingers in a program and to put at the end after a series of loop sections, so it would be great if you could comment more on that. I realized you touched on this in your video about the perfect form. Thanks so much. I really enjoy your info and presentation. He also goes on to follow up this question, mentioning that I've been told and implement that it's good to put reverb on transitional elements. In my mind, this further confuses me because if an editor is looping a section, then the reverb tail would repeat. What am I missing here? First of all, Scott, thank you so much for the question and for your support. I'm glad you enjoy the channel and the videos and the community. Creating looping sections is a real challenge, and any composers out there who have done any game composition will absolutely be familiar with that. Answering your second question first about reverb, I actually don't put a ton of reverb on transitional elements because the risers and stingers and all of those sweeps, they tend to already have reverbs or effects baked into them. I use a lot of one-shots. That having been said, anytime I do any like cymbal scrapes or cymbal swells or any drum effects, I do drench those in reverb just to kind of smooth them out. As far as an edit and the loopability, I'm assuming you are referring to an editor actually taking, like the audio file, cutting it and then looping it from there. If you're doing the transitional elements consistently enough, then they should be occurring somewhat regularly anyway. In which case, the transition out of one section A or the first phrase going into the second phrase and just kind of looping those, the risers and the sweeps and cymbal swells and scrapes or whatever kind of feed into those. That having been said, editors are very, very good at fading, at crossfading, and they could easily, if they need to loop it, they could stack it, one on top of each other and have the reverb from the previous one kind of fade out while the next loop comes in. They are exceedingly skilled at this. If you've ever had a chance to see a video editor doing their thing, then you can see it's just, it's with video, but it looks like our Logic sessions or our Cubase sessions or Pro Tools, where you just have audio file after audio file just stacked on top of each other. And editors will also, you mentioned stems. They will take, a drum stem from one track, from one cue from one composer, and take maybe the bass stem from another composer and mix those together. It's not unusual at all for editors to do that, to blend multiple composers' cues all together, and they are very, very, very skilled at that. So I would focus on being as consistent as possible with your transitional elements, so that they are very regular, and each phrase has some sort of transitional element that pushes energy into the next phrase, and the editor can then either crossfade or stack them on top and blend them that way. That's how I think they solve that. I think you might be overthinking it a little bit. I would encourage you to maybe experiment, maybe take a couple of your cues and bring them in as audio files and loop them on top of each other and see if that works for you. See if you can't do some of those edits. I'm a firm believer that as composers, we need to be familiar with the editing process. And I encourage anybody out there who is a composer getting into music for media, especially production music, because we always have to think like an editor, and we always have to be kind of getting in their brain. And I would encourage you to, open up Final Cut or Adobe Premiere, or there's a free one that's made by Blackmagic Design, and I'm totally blanking on the name of it. It's not Dorico. Is it Dorico? No, that's notation software. Anyways, I'm sure somebody in the comments will know. Comment below. There's a free one that it's a nonlinear video editor, and I would encourage you to get into some video editing. Experiment, try it out, and I think you will learn a lot. Maybe shoot your own video, maybe or grab some stock video from Motion Array or something like that. Just some video, and edit a little video together, and then take one of your cues. Don't score it. Take one of your cues and try to line it up. Try to loop it, try to, grab the button or the stinger from the end and attach it, or grab a scene from a movie or a trailer or something. If you haven't done that, I highly encourage you. You will learn a lot about the editing process. You will learn a lot about the tools that they would use. I would say that most editors use Premiere or Final Cut, even though I think this Blackmagic one, that name's totally escaping me right now. Those are the two primary, Final Cut and Adobe Premiere. And you'll have to kind of learn some of the tool itself. It can be somewhat daunting, but remember, you're not trying to learn how to be an editor. You're trying to just crawl into the editor's mind for a little bit. And who knows, you might end up liking it. I've had to kind of back into being learning about video editing through creating this YouTube channel, doing videos for Full Sail and assets and all of that kind of thing. But it has made me a better composer because I understand the way the editor looks and incorporates my music. It's just like, as a composer, being able to it's one thing to like write for oboe, but until you've been around like an actual oboe player or even had a chance to play an oboe or spend some time with an oboist, there's a level of understanding that you really can't reach. It's one of the reasons that music educators take methods classes. So they learn, how to play string, brass, high brass, low brass, high strings, low strings, percussion. It's not only so that they can teach, sixth graders how to hold a horn, but also just to have a further understanding of how that instrument works. So as a composer, if we want to be really authentic to writing brass lines or writing percussion, then we need to spend some time around those instruments. The exact is true for us from an editor's standpoint. So to go back to the thesis question here is, these transitional elements, do they create issues after or for looping sections? I would say probably not as much as you think, especially if you are being somewhat regular about it and then realizing and understanding that editors are exceedingly skilled at what they do. So I hope that answers your question. And again, if you can remember, if somebody out there remembers the name of that, just look to the comments right now. I'm sure it's already there, the comments for what the name of that nonlinear editor is. Pranav G asks, I would like to know, is there any list of all the music libraries? There's not a list of all of them. However, I would encourage you to check out musiclibraryreport.com.org. I can actually kind of look it up. Well, no, I won't pull it up now. But musiclibraryreport.com or .org, that is a subscription service, and they have a listing of libraries. Now, admittedly, you can find all of this information for free. It's available through Google, but Music Library Report kind of collates it all and puts it into one location in case you didn't, want to do crazy amounts of digging. Richard also mentioned PRS for music. There's a link there that you can check out, and the Production Music Association at pma.org. I think it's or PMA Music. And I'll have links to all of this in the show notes because I'm whiffing on all of these links. PMA Music which is a Production Music Association, has a list of member libraries who are a member of the Production Music Association, and it is quite a lot of them. And that at least can point you in the right direction to where you can start Googling them and finding out their information. Now, it's important to understand that there are large umbrellas of music libraries, like Warner Chappell is one of them. Universal is another one. And they have many subsidiaries. And so the sub-publishers, these small, more niche or boutique libraries, are funneled into a much bigger organization. So many of them do accept unsolicited submissions where you can just look them up and click on their contact information, or a lot of times towards the bottom of these websites, they will have submission procedures or policies. Now, if they're not taking submissions, don't submit. Don't email them. If they say we're not accepting new composers at this time or new submissions, then just file it away. And if you're going to send an email and reaching out, say, I understand you're not, introduce yourself. I understand you're not accepting submissions. I would love to be on your newsletter, or I would love to learn how I can discover when you are. Am I saying this correctly? If they have an email newsletter, then mention that. If you're going to reach out, don't submit materials, but you can inquire about when submissions might might be open. The worst that can happen is they'll ignore you. That's the worst that can happen. And if they're not taking submissions, then you have to kind of respect and honor that. That usually means that they are filled up and they have enough going on to where they aren't able to onboard new composers. And believe it or not, I think that's a good sign. I think when a library shuts down submissions, that means that they are servicing the composers that they have. And so I take that as a good sign. It's a drag that you can't submit to a library you think you might be a really good fit for, but that means that they're probably doing something right. They are honoring the composers they have on board. That means that they have a healthy submission environment, culture, with their composers, and I think that's a good sign. So if you go to the prsformusic.com link or the pmamusic.com link, where you just see kind of the list, then you can dig up the contact information. Now, Music Library Report has contact information, and it's been a while since I've joined them, but I seem to remember they indicate whether or not they are accepting submissions or not. I did, if memory serves me, I seem to remember that some of the information might have been a little outdated, but it could just be that they haven't posted, like those libraries haven't posted. It is. I didn't finish my thought. They haven't posted new information, and so Music Library Report just has to go off of what they have. It can be super daunting because once you log into Music Library Report and you have Library A is AAA library, Library B is AA aardvark. I mean, it's not really. I don't think those are actual libraries, but it's a giant list because there are a lot of music libraries out there, and it can be mega overwhelming. So just take it kind of one at a time. Listen to some libraries, see if something is a good fit for your music, for what you already do and what you are already excited and passionate about. And then if they accept unsolicited submissions, then put some cues together, preferably some cues that are available for licensing, and then send it their way. But I wish you the best, but finding new libraries is the eternal question. And nearly every composer that I have talked to is usually actively looking for new libraries, because you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. And if that library dries up, and then now you don't have any more income, and they're not actively helping you find music or homes for your music. But thanks, Pranav. Thank you so much for that question. Next up, Richard asks, "Hi, Dave. What hints and tips do you have regarding keeping track of where music is used? I'm using Tunesat, but have now run out of free tracks and detections, and the paid option seems very expensive." Tunesat is pretty much one of the only games in town. And it is crazy expensive. The PMA had a recent meetup, like a Zoom meeting, and they had a new service that they talked about. And unfortunately, I'm blanking on the name of that. It's not very helpful, but it's not my ultimate point here is that was really expensive. And these services seemed much more geared towards libraries. I know this other service seemed more geared towards libraries, and for libraries who are like actively seeking to recoup with their PROs, which leads me to my bigger point. I don't subscribe to any of these services, because even if you find a play, the next step is tracking it down and trying to get paid for it. In which case, then you're going to your publisher about it, saying, "Hey, I'm bringing this Tunesat information," and then the publisher then has to negotiate with the PRO. Then that's still no guarantee on whether or not you're actually going to get paid. And for me, there was no no real tangible benefit to putting out all that money for a service like Tunesat. I think is SoundScan another one? SoundScan sounds familiar. There was no tangible benefit because to track down the money for me was seemed very unlikely. And even if it did, the cost of the Tunesat subscription was not outweighed by the money I would recoup from some placements. And so then I started thinking, okay, then why do I want this? Because I do want this. And ultimately, it's for either validation, that, hey, what I'm doing is working, or analytics, or for me, maybe a little vanity. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, Richard, but for me, it was a little bit of vanity. The same reason that I want my songs up on Spotify, because I don't expect millions of people to stream that music, but there's something to be said about having your music on Spotify. And so that's why I haven't subscribed to those. And I would say that if you're subscribing to Tunesat, starting with the fee, the 50 free, and seeing if you are getting hits. And then if you're getting hits, but they're not showing up on your royalty statements, then that's a different conversation to have with your publisher. And I think the conversation isn't, I need to be recouped for these placements. I mean, even though, yes, you do. You should get paid. If your music gets on air, you absolutely have a right and are entitled to get money for that. That's how this whole system works. And if it stops working, then everything breaks down, and the trust between the PROs and composers and publishers, all of that goes away. So if you are getting hits in a Tunesat, even just the 50 free, and like take your 50 free your greatest hits, and if you're getting hits but not seeing them show up on your royalty statements, then use that, again, not as evidence to get paid, but as evidence that there is a breakdown somewhere, which is a different conversation. Going there with your Tunesat sheet and saying, you owe me royalties, again, yes, you do, but that's a different conversation from Tunesat is showing plays that aren't showing up in my cue sheets. So what's the deal with that moving forward? Thinking about, okay, I don't want to lose future royalties. So does that mean that the cue sheets aren't being entered correctly from the production company or the network? Or does that mean that the PRO is dropping the ball somewhere? Or does that mean that cues are getting just totally lost? Are cues getting misattributed to the wrong composer? Are the cues just taking a long time? Are they in the system but just haven't showed up on your cue sheet an abnormally long time? And so my recommendation, unless you have some pull or an in with your PRO or your publisher, and they will start compensating you for missed plays that you detect via Tunesat, is grab your most active, that you feel are your most active cues across whatever handful of libraries, and go up to the free limit and spend some time with those in Tunesat. Give it a few quarters and seeing if that can start the conversation. That's what I feel the best benefit for Tunesat and services like Tunesat is not for recouping missed royalties, but for finding cracks in the system. It's kind of like if you think you have a flat tire, if you put the tire underwater, you can see the bubbles. That's what Tunesat feels like to me. And if you approach it that way, then I don't think you need hundreds and hundreds of cues listed in Tunesat. Not if it's just the canary, in your coal mine. But yeah, if anybody here has had luck communicating with a PRO or a publisher and recouping missed royalties, then I would love to hear from you. And please let me know in the comments below. But to date, I have not registered any of my cues with Tunesat because it is ridiculously expensive. And I don't know, does Tunesat also cover, like, is it going to cover alt mixes? Or do you have to, I know that alt mixes are registered separately from the PROs. And I wonder if Tunesat picks up on alts and stems. That's a good question. In which case, then the number of cues that you need registered just exponentially blows up. I mean, we just talked to Scott having 18 stems. Yeah, that's 18 of your 50 free. Yeah, that's a challenge. But I would love to absolutely hear from anybody if you've had some luck with Tunesat or those other services. And if you have any other services, please let us know in the comments below. Enrico. What is up, Enrico? Just saw Enrico this morning during our live stream. Glad he was able to join in. Enrico says, I'm still really interested in a better understanding of genre naming. When is a cue dramedy and when is it urban comedy? Light tension, dramatic, epic stuff. More, I suppose, to what are the expected tropes to make it into a genre? This is a fantastic question, but I want to make a delineation first, and that is what the word genre means. And libraries kind of treat this somewhat differently, but for me, genre are large musical genres such as rock, hip hop, soundtrack, Latin, classical, EDM, house, trip hop. These are genres, and genres of music can have various moods or emotions or vibes. So when you say dramedy is a type of cue. It is a mood, but it's not necessarily a genre of music, because you can have orchestral dramedy cues. You can have hip-hop dramedy cues. You can have pop, rock dramedy cues. What defines the mood or emotion or vibe are three things. They are the harmonic language, the instrumentation being used, and the rhythmic language. Okay, and I'm going to do a much deeper dive video coming up in the next several weeks about what really defines mood and how you break those things down. But as far as knowing if something is dramedy versus urban comedy versus light tension or dramatic epic stuff, a lot of that is determined by the harmonic language and the instrumentation. For example, dramedy, still to this day, pizzicato strings dominate the conversation. It's very much a trope, and I see libraries like saying, okay, enough with the pizzicato strings, we don't want any more. And yet, you watch TV and you see some scene where the characters are comically attempting to solve a problem, or bumbling dad, or kids like trying to solve a puzzle, and they're woefully, underqualified to do so. You're going to hear pizzicato. You're going to hear pizzicato strings. Even though libraries are trying to push out of that, I think the editors and even the audience expects those tropes. It's kind of like, blues form. If you want to hear a blues song, you're going to hear blues chords. It's just, as soon as you move out of the harmonic language that is associated with blues, then it stops becoming blues. And as soon as you start pulling pizzicato strings off of a dramedy cue, then it starts shifting into another mood, into another emotion or a vibe. And that's the risk you run when you start, wanting things differently. Now, you can get quirky bassoon or a little synth, or there's things you can do to keep dramedy without necessarily using just pizzicato strings. But composers, libraries, editors, listeners, keep going back to that well, because it just works. It's just expected. Like throwing sleigh bells on a cue. As soon as you do that, congratulations, you probably got yourself a Christmas cue. Whether that's fair to sleigh bells or not is really not up for debate. You throw steel drums on a cue, then you have probably a Caribbean cue, something that's going to sound like an island cue. You throw a flamenco style guitar, and then it immediately puts it into a certain cultural or geographic or time, place. So the challenge for us as composers, as we are writing, is to make sure that we're writing a cue that lands in one of those lanes, as opposed to writing something and then figuring out what mood or emotion it is encompassing. Or to use your term, what genre it is. Again, for me, genre is like hip hop, rock. Those are those big, broad categories. Even though I think I have seen a library say genre tension. Now, tension is a mood. The genre would be like orchestral or soundtrack, instrumental. So I think where some composers get into trouble is they write something that is kind of just coming out of their muse, which is great, and then kind of back into, I wonder what mood or emotion I'm going for here, or what mood or emotion this is. And I think we will have much better success if we start with the mood or emotion we are looking to capture. If that's dramedy, then bring on the pizzicato strings, unless your library is saying like, do not do pizzicato strings. If you're doing light tension, and that means like synth pulses, and that means, slow harmony where it's just kind of hanging on one chord, but the harmonic motion is at like phrase points or at section points. If you're doing something epic, then that means like big staccato strings and brass blats and ostinatos aplenty, big epic drums. But it starts, don't write something and then try to shoehorn your mood or emotion into it. I think that's I'm guessing that folks that get rejected from Taxi or something that doesn't get forwarded, I would imagine that is very common. Or if you have a cue that gets rejected from a library, I think you're putting your cart before your horse. The horse is, what mood am I going for? And as soon as you know the type of cue you're writing, what mood you're going for, then the recipe fills itself in. Enrico, I know you're in Italy. So as soon as you bring up some pasta primavera, you already know what most of the ingredients are going to be. I don't know, it's pasta primavera. I just went for the first like Italian sounding meal or dish, but you get the idea. Start with the mood or emotion that will dictate the recipe you bring up, and then it's just a matter of gathering your ingredients, sharpening your tools, and using the right tools and techniques. That's also another video coming up, and which is a continuation kind of the artisan mentality that I talked about last year, which is you have to kind of think like a chef. And when a chef sits down to make a meal or to make a dish, they start with, what type of dish am I wanting? Is it lunch? Is it dinner? Is it hors d'oeuvres? Is it appetizers? Is it dessert? It's not just, I like tuna and I have tuna and I like brown sugar. Let's see what happens when we mash them together. That sounds really disgusting, by the way, but I'm sure that's a dish somewhere. So yeah. So for Andrew's follow-up, I would absolutely suggest starting from what mood you're going for and then going from there. Now, naming them, that can be a little tricky. Like when you say dramedy, you write something with pizzicato, then dramedy. Urban comedy usually involves bringing in some sort of like hip hop element, because even to this day, the term urban is market speech for African American or inner city or just young, youthful, right? That's just urban speak for all of those things. Marketing speak, rather. They say urban. But probably that's going to be like a hip-hop dramedy cue. Some 808s, some snaps. So yeah, I hope that helped. I hope that question was helpful, or I hope the answer. The question was definitely helpful. I hope that answer was good for you. All right. Jeff LaPlante has a question about consideration fees or upfront fees. Jeff says, I have come across a few courses educational subscription services who claim to help composers succeed in the industry. In their marketing and advertising pitches, they refer to libraries paying consideration fees of up to $500 per track. However, when you talk to other composers in the community, taxi forums, other social media groups, even the most successful composers will say that this is very uncommon. One ad for a sync course claimed that a 19-second cue can generate $1,000 every time it's used. Again, when you talk to experienced composers, those figures are unheard of. I guess I'm asking, what is the truth? All right, so there are a couple of questions I kind of see in here. The first question is the consideration fees, and so let me start with that. In the production music world, so we're not talking about film music, we're not talking about game music, and we're not even talking about any bespoke music like an ad campaign and they pay. It is exceedingly rare to get upfronts, and if you get upfront, it's usually a couple $100 to get put into their library. I will say, for everything that I've ever had air on CBS Sports, I've gotten no upfronts. It's all 100% back end. But when I do bespoke music, I do get upfront. Another library I work with, another couple of libraries, they pay a small one is $150, another one's $200, just one off because it's exclusive and to help get it into their library. I appreciate it, and I'm glad that it's there. But I'm not paying my mortgage necessarily with $200 a cue, even if it is an album of 10 or 12 cues. It helps. Again, don't get me wrong, but it's all about back end. Now, once you get into bespoke territory, then you are seeing much more upfront money, whether it's a trailer or whether it's an ad, because it's kind of understood that ads are going to have a relatively short shelf life. I got an ad for a MediaCom spot through a publisher, and it was about $1,200 up front. And for about one quarter, I got some decent back-end royalties. But once that ad went off the air, then poof, all those royalties dried up. That cue kind of goes back into the library. Did some bespoke production music for a master's movie. Every year they put out a movie, and there are some upfronts there, but there's practically zero back end for that. Game music, the same way. Game music is all upfront, and you get no back end because typically game music is a buyout. Yep. Film music, it's all negotiated, and upfront, it's a lot more upfront. Back-end royalties typically don't come in on actual movie views and movie sales. It actually, the back end comes off of soundtrack plays on Spotify or sales on iTunes or whatever. So having libraries, production music libraries, just paying out money up front, that's if they do that, I imagine they're probably cutting themselves into your writer share, in which case tread lightly. I would encourage you to be careful with deals like that. They're not an automatic no, but it's just be careful. Make sure that if you're cutting somebody into your writer share, making sure that that it is equitable and you are receiving something of value for that. It's never a never for me, and I have given up writer share many times, but it was because it was an equitable situation for me. All right, so that's the first question. One ad claimed that a 19-second cue can generate $1,000 every time. I would love to know what 19-second placement is getting $1,000. I had one of my cues used in the Super Bowl coverage. It was pregame of this past year, 2 years ago. So of 2021, not 2022, when it was last on CBS. And one of those plays got $80, guys. $80. Meanwhile, I got about $400 for a 3-minute play on the rugby championship. Cool. I've also got like $1.50 off of a Netflix play. So it's all over the place, but a 19-second cue, that feels a little snake oily to me, if I'm being honest. And without, I don't want you to tell me which ad this was or what educational subscription service and everything. Yeah, those feel like lofty claims, and your spider sense is tingling when like that doesn't really sound right. And I would say, trust that. Now, the next part of your question has to do with online courses, educational services. I'm going to also tread lightly here because it's a mixed bag. There are a lot of amazing resources out on YouTube, on the internet, from amazing composers who are giving of themselves. There's also, it's kind of a gold rush right now. COVID, brought everybody indoors, and suddenly the production music world got a pretty bright spotlight on it in the composer world and sync music in general, sync licensing. And it shone a spotlight on alternative ways for composers to make money making music. And I think that COVID and the pandemic and lockdowns had a lot to do with that, personally. That also means that during the gold rush, there were quite a few folks that kind of popped up and kind of started peddling these like make money quick, these get rich quick schemes. And Dan Graham talks in his book, this is a get rich very slowly scene. And so as you are looking at educational services, and I realize and recognize that I am one of them, and I am really good friends with several others. I just did an interview with Eric Copeland of Make Music Income. Great guy. His channel is all about making money making music. And that's great. And his co-host runs Production Music Academy, which is great. And there are a lot of really amazing people doing amazing things. My recommendation for you is, first of all, trust your spidey sense. Trust the little flags that your spirit or your muse or whatever are throwing up, not as a shut them down, but as a means to dig a little bit deeper. And once you dig a little bit deeper, look at the people who are running them. Look at who are offering or who is offering the service. Look at, what other people are saying about it, but also, look through their YouTube history. Look on their website. Any prices should be clear. It should outline what you get out of it. I think any service which is promising you results, I would absolutely walk away from. And any of these lofty claims like you can make $1,000 off of 20 seconds worth of music, no. Nope. Yeah. And libraries paying $500. These seem really, and again, I have no idea who this is. And I don't need to know. I don't want to know. And if this is you, and if I'm talking, out my ass, then you can come at me and we can have a conversation about it. But as soon as you start promising things to people, then you've got to deliver. Otherwise, you're running a con. Wow, that got really real and heavy. That's how it feels to me. Don't promise anything. Can you deliver education? Can you improve people? That's one thing. And you should be compensated for that. If you're a teacher, you're offering educational services, and you are helping better folks. That's one thing. I have a Patreon. I've got some really exciting things coming up that I can't wait to talk about. But I will never promise that you can make $1,000 with 20 seconds of music. Because to be honest, if I knew about those types of situations, making $1,000, that would be $3,000 a minute. Oh my gosh, what am I doing making YouTube videos for? Why I need to be making hundreds of those cues. But that just doesn't seem real. That might be one isolated incident, maybe. That was a very special circumstance. But it's super dangerous. And if you're an educator out there, and if you have a service, and I'm talking to you, it's very dangerous to put that on your website and advertise that. And you can put results not typical at the bottom. That's BS, dude. We're not selling. Okay, now I'm just talking to the other educators out there. We are not selling like quick weight loss supplements here. Otherwise, we might as well be freaking InfoWars and selling our soybean supplements and all. No, come on. Come on. I realize I sound pretty ranty like J. Jonah Jameson. Don't make promises like that if I'm reading that correctly. But if you resonate with an educator, and if you're watching this, I hope you're resonating with me. I can help you as an educator. I can help you get better as a composer. I can help you understand production music and the industry. I can help you, understand, royalties and song form and structure and mixing. I can help you with all those things. But what I can't do is promise that your music will get on TV. Nobody can promise that. I can't promise that you're going to make $500 per track. And I'm not going to hold up another student and say, this guy made $1,000 for 20 seconds of music, so you can too. Results not typical. Your experience may vary. Fine print, spoken really quietly and very quickly at the end of the ad. Dude, we all hate that. I hate that. So yeah, okay. That got me all worked up in a froth, and I didn't even expect it. Jeff, that is a fantastic question. It's because I'm really passionate about it. So trust your spidey sense. Get thee to Google. Go Google their names. Check them out on IMDb. Look at. It's not that you have to have an IMDb, credits and everything. It is curious. I will say that it's curious if someone claims to have like thousands and thousands of placements, but their IMDb is a ghost town. That feels a little sus to me, but maybe I'll edit this out. I probably won't. That's too much work. I've already gone, wow, this is already 48 minutes. This is going to be a long one, which is fine, which is totally fine. Let's move on. I think I need to take a sip of coffee first. And then finally, Andrew asks, this might be a strange one, given the ephemeral nature of so many cues, but are there any widely agreed upon classics of library music? There's so much quality stuff out there. How do you find examples of great cues and albums for study or inspiration? I think there are two questions going on here. The first is classics of library music, and I can't really think of any, although, if you look at anything by like E.S. Posthumous or Two Steps from Hell, those are like some trailer classics, and you'll hear some stuff from Nick Murray, who is a trailer composer. His stuff has been heard on like Cinderella. You've heard it like multiple times, but you kind of nailed it. Given the ephemeral nature of so many cues, the music should kind of stick into the background. It should blend into the background if it's being done correctly. And so as such, they don't really catch on. They're not really, you can't go listen, you can't buy an album of it. And if you could, why would you want an album of dramedy cues or something like that? I think that the trailer music would be But I would love to know if you're watching this, any classics like the evergreen cues that we can all like. Hey, we all love this one. But I don't personally know of any. Now, as far as finding great examples, there is an option. There are options for you in that regard. First, I mentioned Spotify. There are some really good production music that is put out on Spotify. I would search for Bleeding Fingers, which is Hans Zimmer's production crew. It's the Remote Control Studios. It's my understanding. It's their crew and it's their production music arm, Bleeding Fingers. And it's run very much like Hans Zimmer runs his studio, which is having, kind of composer lead, and then kind of how things are farmed out to other composers. And I know that Hans has gotten some I don't want to say hate, but I've seen some internet folks getting angry about how he runs his studio, but it's just how, first of all, it's how it's been done for a long time, and he's super transparent about it, and it's how so many other aspects of the movie business is run. You have a lead that then farms out music or farms out tasks and projects to folks under them, and they complete their work. They bring it all together, and then you have the person, the lead, kind of put it together. It's how animation gets done. It's how computer graphics gets done. So enough of that. But Bleeding Fingers, I would check out them. And Extreme Music, I think it's extrememusic.com. Extreme Music has their entire library that you can check out. And Extreme Music that's like cream of the crop as far as production music. I have a suspicion that Extreme Music is it's like film composers, and it's like their cues kind of pulled out and then put in and production music libraryized, if that's a word, because I've referenced some of them, and the forms can be really, really strange, like with odd phrasing. And so I know that there are very many triple A-list composers and songwriters, producers. I think it's like Snoop Dogg is listed in their catalog, as well as many, many, many others. So Extreme Music has their catalog that you can browse right now. Also, many other libraries put their catalogs for potential clients, but for us, it's fantastic for referencing. It's a gold mine, because you can get access to alternate mixes, cut downs, so the mix minus melody, and it's all just there. Now, obviously, don't copy, don't plagiarize, all of that, but it's there. And the Extreme Music is a gold mine. Just know that you are swimming with the big fish. I almost said big dogs. You're swimming with the big dogs. You're running with the big dogs, swimming with the big fish, when you are putting your music next to the folks over at Extreme Music. That is A-list composers, Hollywood level. We have real string players. We have, it's not just a bunch of samples, on a laptop. This is the big dogs. And so I would encourage you to check those all out. Well, that's going to do it for me. Those are all the questions that I had. So for now, let's change gears. By the way, before I just wrap this up, thank you, everybody, for all of your questions. And like I said, I know this is going plenty long, but that's okay. That's all right. I want to thank everybody for submitting their questions and for being a continued supporter of 52Qs and being a contributor to the 52Qs community over at Facebook. You can go to it at 52Qs.com. Speaking of community, let's now change gears and let's take a listen to Andrew Thomas's Clouds Are Mountains, and we're going to listen to it, and then I'm going to give my thoughts on the other side. All right, that was Clouds or Mountain by Andrew Thomas. Thank you so much for submitting your cue here in the week 10 feedback thread. First, out of the gate, I really like this. You've done a fantastic job with layering. And I know you mentioned in your post that you're new to cue writing, but even though you've been doing instrumental tracks for as long as you can remember. And so really nice job, especially if you're relatively new to writing cues, because you've done a fantastic job of layering, which is building up energy as the cue goes along. And I can even tell that there's a little bit of breakdown in here and then a return back to your A section. I think speaking of form, we're in really good shape. And I think some editors would be able to use this. Now, the first thing I noticed though is your piano sounds distorted. Now, this might be a creative decision. It might be a choice. And if it's not distorted, then there's some other effect. And again, I get the feeling that this is a choice, that this is a creative choice, in which case, I completely understand and can respect that. From an editor's standpoint, it sounds like it's clipping. Even though I can clearly see it's not, it sounds like it's clipping. It sounds a little too dirty. It's a little too affected to the point where, if, like, imagine it under a scene, I think it would give an editor pause, because it sounds like an error and not necessarily a choice. And this is something that that when I listen to like the Peaceful Piano playlist on Spotify, and these are piano parts played by humans, like on actual pianos, and many of these pianos are in desperate need of servicing. They sound terrible. The pedal noise and the squeaks and all of the accoutrement of a live piano performance is fantastic if you're listening to, like, I'm sitting here with my headphones on and listening to a piano performance. However, if this piece of music was to be underneath a scene happening with dialogue and action and emotion going on, then all of those accoutrements are a distraction, can absolutely be a distraction. So this is to all my Peaceful Piano playlist performers. Service your pianos, guys. Service your pianos. I don't need to hear your pedal thunk like I just dropped it off of a balcony. All right, that's all I got to say about that. It's really distracting, and I think it's maybe I'm just in production world. So when I hear the distortion in at the top of your piano part, it sounds like an error. Again, I understand. I believe it's probably a creative choice. I like all the little reverse things going on. Fantastic with the ostinato, the melody going on top of it, keeping the same while the chords change underneath it. I like that. The melody works absolutely on top of it. This layering, 4 bars later, we're adding another element to it, which I think is fantastic. The bass feels a little loud. A little too boom. And I would maybe adjust the attack envelope so it kind of sneaks in just a little bit and probably bring it down in the mix. I like the little pizzicato. This is a good example of pizzicato not in a dramedy fashion. And I would ease these strings in. At this point, we're essentially layering in little melodic ideas. And I feel like this melody, by now, we have enough melodic happening that this melody feels too busy. Right? It feels like another kind of layer. It's a bridge too far. So I would simplify it, pull it down in the mix, and really work on the strings so that they slide into each other a little bit easier. Yeah, because they're kind of so maybe some overlapping, and it might be that the string samples you're using they might not have an adjustable or a legato transition that really helps with that. That's a real challenge of having such an exposed string line like that. Is we know as humans what this should sound like. So when you bring a MIDI instrument to the table, then the artificiality can kind of betray that. Not quite sure about that secondary line. I would take that octave. I would hold the octave until the next phrase. Possibly. I don't know. By this point, we're about a minute in and we go into our breakdown, which is like spot on. If I'm an editor, I could easily grab the end of this, right? I could grab the end of this little button piece here and stick it right there and right to the end of that first phrase, right around the minute mark. So we are in good shape. Again, that's something that I think about, but it doesn't drive my compositional choices. It's just a consideration. So I'm not even sure you need that second high line, even though I feel like it's leading into our B section here. See, I would go da, da, da. I would simplify the string line in the phrase before it. Just long notes, so you don't need to necessarily bring another melodic idea to the table. And then when we go into the breakdown, then you can have that high string line, which I really like. That the strings sound nice here. Nice chord choices here. I like the addition of the percussion there. I'm a sucker for a groove in any type of cue, so having a boom, love it. Backing it up a little bit. Has almost a Phil Collins kind of in the air tonight kind of. I would put a cleaner edit point here. You could probably just hit that downbeat right there. Let it hold. Right, let the instruments die out just a little bit so that an editor, if they needed to extend a scene, they could chop it right there and then stretch that out. You don't necessarily have to give them an absolute clean break to silence, because they can dip down and fade if they need it, but you want to give them a little bit more room here at this little breakdown point. Fantastic job with the suspended cymbal coming out of this breakdown. And see, I like holding the high strings until the recap, or the recapitulation. And instead of introducing your high strings in your first A, let the high strings be a feature of your B section, of your breakdown, so that you have an A and then a B, and then your A plus B at the end. Kind of bringing your low strings from your A section, high strings from your B section. You know, you got your peanut butter and my chocolate. You got your chocolate and my peanut butter. That harmonically, that feels a little strange right there. I think we need to adjust that melody note right there. That note. I don't think that's working under. Yeah, you resolve it up, but I would choose a different note there and still resolve it the same way. would sit that high string on that note and carry it over the button. Nice fade. It absolutely works. Andrew, thank you so much for submitting that cue. This was a cue that was submitted during our week 10, our week 10 writing prompt, or our feedback threads. Every week we post a new thread, and members of the community come and add their own, and they get feedback, they leave feedback. So lots of really great discussions happening. And if you want to join us, please do head over to 52cues.com. We would absolutely love to have you there. So that is going to do it for me today. Once again, thank you to Andrew for submitting your cue, and thank you for everybody submitting your questions. Excuse me. I really enjoyed reading those, and I love everything that's going on over at the 52 communities. Lastly, I would be remiss if I did not thank my Patreon patrons whose support helps keep this channel going. To be a patron, it's just $1 a month, and you not only get the satisfaction of helping keep the channel going and bringing exciting new things to the forefront, but you also get access to my music production live streams. We had a live stream last night, and then I wrapped it up just this morning at 6 a.m., fired up the live stream and did a final mix and master of a golf cue that we were working on. And so if you become a patron, then you get access to those. You don't have to do that. If you just want to come and receive, you don't have to subscribe to the channel. You don't have to do any of that. If you just want to come and receive here at the channel, that is completely okay as well. But that is going to do it for me. I hope that you had a good week 11. I can't wait to talk to you next week about that. But until next time, peace. The 52 Cues podcast is copyright 2022 Dave Croft, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the 52 Cues community and submitting your cue for consideration on the podcast, head over to 52cues.com.